every morning before he commanded his armies or judged the disputes of an empire. Marcus Aurelius sat alone, and he imagined his own death. Not in fear, not in dread. As a practice, he imagined losing everything he loved: his power, his family, his health, his life. And then he got up and led the most powerful empire in the world. What Marcus Aurelius was practicing has a name. The Stoics called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. And almost no one is using it correctly. Here is something almost no one tells you about anxiety. Your brain is not broken when it imagines worst-case scenarios. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Your brain has a threat prediction system, constantly scanning for danger, running simulations of what could go wrong. This system kept your ancestors alive. The brain that immediately thought that sound in the grass could be a predator survived. The brain that waited for confirmation did not. The Stoics understood this 2,000 years before neuroscience gave it a name. They didn't fight the brain's tendency to imagine the worst. They trained it to do it better. That is the difference between anxiety and premeditatio malorum. Both involve imagining bad outcomes. One happens to you, the other you choose. When most people hear negative visualization, they imagine pessimism. They hear, think about what could go wrong. Lower your expectations. Prepare for failure. That is not what this is. The Stoics were not pessimists. They were engineers. They were designing a specific internal state, not through wishful thinking, not through denial, but through deliberate mental rehearsal of the thing they feared most. Donald Robertson, cognitive psychotherapist and author of How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, put it precisely. The Stoics weren't dwelling on misfortune. They were exposing themselves to it, briefly and deliberately, the way a doctor administers a vaccine. The immune system doesn't get stronger by avoiding illness. The mind doesn't get stronger by avoiding fear. Done incorrectly, without structure, without a specific protocol, imagining worst-case scenarios does produce anxiety. It produces rumination. It produces the loop your brain already runs on its own. Done correctly, with the 4 steps the Stoics used, it produces the exact opposite. Here is why. And this is the part that changes how you understand every anxiety you have ever had. Anticipatory anxiety runs the threat simulation without resolution. Your brain imagines the bad outcome, feels the fear response, but receives no endpoint. The simulation loops, the fear compounds. Premeditatio malorum breaks the loop by going further. You run the simulation all the way through, not stopping at the moment of loss, moving past it. What would actually happen? How would I cope? What would remain? When you reach the end of that simulation and find that you are still standing, that you can handle it, your brain updates its prediction. This scenario is survivable. The threat loses its power not because you denied it, but because you faced it with evidence. This is the same mechanism behind exposure therapy. The Stoics built a version of it 20 centuries before the clinical research existed to explain it. Here is the protocol. 4 steps. Step 1. Identify the specific fear. Not a category of worry, a specific scenario. I am afraid of losing my job. I am afraid my relationship will end. I am afraid I will fail at this. The more specific, the more effective. Vague fear cannot be resolved. Specific fear can be faced. Step 2. Run the simulation to completion. Imagine the event occurring. Don't stop at the moment of loss. Move through it. What would your life look like 1 week after? 1 month? 1 year? This is where most people stop too early. The brain needs to reach the end of the simulation to update its prediction. Go further than feels comfortable. Step 3. Identify what remains. After the worst case scenario plays out, what is still there? Your values, your character, your capacity to act, your relationships, your mind. Marcus Aurelius called this the only thing that was ever truly yours. Everything else, the position, the wealth, the health, the relationships, was borrowed. The mind, the character, the response, these cannot be taken. Premeditatio Malorum works precisely because it exercises what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control. Once you can see what remains after the worst, you can see what was actually yours all along. Step 4. Return to the present with gratitude. This is the step most modern interpretations miss entirely. After imagining the loss, return your attention to what you have, not as abstract gratitude, but as something you have just deeply, viscerally felt the value of. The Stoics call this the double benefit of negative visualization. You become less afraid of the future and more grateful for the present, simultaneously, with the same practice. Before you practice this, there is one mistake that turns negative visualization into rumination. The difference between Premeditatio Malorum and anxiety is not the content. It is the relationship to the content. Anxiety is passive. The simulation happens to you. Premeditatio Malorum is active. You choose to enter the simulation. You choose when to exit. You observe it from outside. If you find yourself unable to reach step 4, unable to return from the simulation with clarity, stop. That is rumination, not negative visualization. For people with anxiety disorders or trauma, working with a therapist who uses exposure-based approaches is the more appropriate entry point. For everyone else, for the ordinary human fear that comes from loving things you know you could lose, Premeditatio Malorum is not a morbid exercise. It is a practice of honesty. A refusal to pretend that loss cannot come, and therefore a refusal to spend your life in the low-grade terror of someone who knows it can, but will not look directly at it. Marcus Aurelius imagined his own death every morning. Not because he was afraid of dying, because he refused to waste the day pretending he wouldn't. The Stoics didn't practice negative visualization because they expected the worst. They practiced it because they refused to be surprised by it. After all, we're all human